Good day, my name is Christel from Frans, Klerk, Independent Technical Analyst. Mary wanted us to look at the Rand against the Euro. And we can see clearly on this weekly graph, Mary, that the 40-week moving average that represents that red line has now changed into a resistance. And that tells us the long-term sentiment towards the Rand against the Euro is a stronger Rand. So we can see the next strong support there is waiting there around 1634. And should that level change into a resistance, we are sitting here with a possible massive inverse cup and handle formation. So that support level is a critical level that needs to remain a support, because should the Rand start to consolidate below that level, we can see the Rand a lot stronger against the Euro. Obviously, we can see the stochastic is still pointing downwards. Both my lines tells me and implies that the momentum to the bottom is still in place. And we do not try to catch a falling knife, so we should wait till the Rand starts to consolidate, stop making new recent lows, and then maybe consider a position again should the stochastic be in oversold territory, to maybe consider saying, I think the Rand will weaken a little bit in the short term against the Euro again, and maybe use that as a buying opportunity. But at the moment, the strength of the Rand is in place against the Euro, especially the fact that that 40-week moving average has changed into a resistance. And this massive inverse cup and handle tells us that we can see a stronger Rand against the Euro. Obviously, you can use either the highs of the shadows or the real bodies as possible resistance levels to identify probably a weaker Rand against the Euro. And we can use either Fibonacci levels. So the first one would be 1694, 1714, 1733, that 40-week moving average, which is waiting at 1748, and then that high waiting at 1795. Those are possible resistance levels that have to change into a support in order to change our opinion again to a weaker Rand against the Euro. JB wanted us to look at Prosus. And JB, I wanted to change this to a line graph because I want to show you there is a beautiful double bottom, distorted double bottom. The strong consecutive support levels are quite close to one another. So some might even call it a tweezer bottom. But nevertheless, that strong resistance on Prosus that on a line graph is waiting and has waited at 1,308 Rand 98 has now changed into a support. And that tells us that this might be the turnaround pattern that investors have been waiting for as a possible buying opportunity again. Yes, our stochastic has broken upwards from oversold levels, which was the ideal place to buy or accumulate the share. But now that level of 1,308.98 has to remain a support. These are weekly graphs, in other words, by a Friday close. The Prosus have to close above that level on a Friday in order to assume that this possible double bottom is still in place. The share is consolidating below that red line, my 40-week moving average, and that is the line in the sand for long-term investors. As soon as Prosus started to consolidate below that level, the long-term sentiment towards this share has changed to negative. Obviously, below these consecutive support levels, waiting at 1,227 Rand, below that level, should the share retrace back to those support levels and it starts to change them into a resistance, we can assume then that, hey, the momentum to the bottom can escalate again and we can see lower levels. But this is a turnaround pattern, JB, and this might be an opportunity to accumulate, to buy the share. My stochastic is in mid-zone, sitting on a 48, not an ideal place, but keep an eye on that lower level, 1,227 Rand. Below that level, the tears will flow again about Prosus. Gonse wanted us to look at the Nasdaq100. Gonse, and you asked in your question here whether you should consider a long. So I'm assuming you're a CFD investor. We look at weekly graphs on Talking Technicals, and I even looked at a daily graph. And my answer is, please do not. Why? The index is extremely overbought and has been overbought for quite a while. What does that mean? It means the probability of the instrument to retrace, to pull back, where investors are going to take profit, is more likely. Remember, we are using with probabilities and possibilities and the likelihood that something should happen. We want to buy an instrument when it's oversold. In other words, on a stochastic, it should be below a 20. And when that positive divergence takes place, that blue line starts to break upwards through that orange line from oversold levels below a 20, that's when you want to consider taking along. If you're a CFD investor, you look at daily graphs. Nothing smaller than an hour, please, because otherwise you'll just be glued to that screen all the time. And every time the candle moves, you want to press a button, and then you're just going to get itchy fingers. Get into the discipline to start with a daily graph, accumulate or put in your stop loss level based on the daily graph. What I also want to highlight is here, this index, the Nasdaq100, is making new recent highs every week. If we go back to a candle graph, you'll see, it's a high upon a high upon a high. So you would be chasing momentum. So if you are a momentum chaser, which means it is very risky to do that, you can use any low of the preceding week's level as a protection level. So you can use the last week was the week of the 23rd of August was 15,278, assuming you want to chase the momentum. Not recommended, definitely not an investment strategy that I would suggest. But if you feel that the momentum to the top, and later when we look at all the technology shares that makes up this Nasdaq 100, I would rather considering a short position because of this index being so overbought and continuing to make new record highs. Nothing always goes up in a straight line. Never does. The index, no matter what it is, an instrument always breathes a little, there's profit taking, then it moves higher. And you should learn to be disciplined in that breathing, that pullbacks, to say, hey, I'm considering taking profit here, I'll wait for the instrument to be oversold again and accumulate again for higher levels. So use those lows, Gonse, but I would not consider a long at this stage. Shiraz wanted us to look at Infineon on the DAX index, ticker IFX. And if I look at this graph, Shiraz, we can see that there is a possible triple top formation. And I want to maybe look at a line graph because it takes the noise out and we can clearly see that this is a possible triple top in the making. I've got the first loop, the second one, a little bit of a false break here, testing levels of support, and then a third one, which makes this a possible triple top formation. Why do I say possible? Because the warning around the triple top will only be confirmed when this support level, waiting there at €31.75, when that level starts to change into a resistance. Take note as well, Shiraz, with a triple top, I've got 3 levels of resistance that are almost at the same place. They don't have to be at the exact place, but more or less. And we can see those levels are waiting there around €36.67. If the share does not change that level into a support by a Friday close and continue to make new recent highs, I would consider to take profit here. Yes, your stochastic is in overbought levels, but you don't have a negative divergence yet. In other words, that blue line needs to turn around and break through that orange line in order to confirm, hey, I need to get ready to consider taking profit here. Yes, your long-term sentiment, that red line, is still positive. That's waiting at $33.70. But keep an eye on that level. Below that level, the long-term sentiment towards Infineon will obviously change to negative, and that triple top, that level as I've given it to you, €31.75, is a critical level that needs to remain in a support in order to assume that the share can maybe reach for higher levels. Don't know where you entered, but at this stage, that overbought levels and that possible top, that triple top, I would consider taking some profit off the table, Shiraz. Rue wanted us to look at Ascendis Health. Listed on our JSE, ticker ASC. And Rue, I know you said in your question that you're in a loss. I think there are only a few, if any, investors that are in a profit on Ascendis Health. So let's have a look at the graph. And I want to maybe also go back to a line graph because I want to show you, you spoke there about an inverse head and shoulder formation on a 15-minute graph. And that means if you look at 15-minute graphs, you're probably a CFD trader, but then I would say it can't be because this share is way too small to be a CFD possibility. So I would maybe go at least to a daily graph, or even a weekly graph. All right, let's look at Ascendis Health. We've got here a possible, and I want to zoom it out even more, inverse cup and handle formation. I've got my first loop, tested the supports, and it looks like I'm working on a possible handle formation. And I say possible because the warning around this inverse cup and handle will only be confirmed when that support level starts to change into a resistance. In other words, when the share starts to consolidate below it, and that is waiting at 55 cents. Remember, these are weekly graphs, so on a Friday close, the share should not close below that level. The warning around this inverse cup and handle will be off the table or obsolete as soon as the share starts to consolidate above 62 cents again. Now, my 40-week moving average is obviously the critical level. That is waiting at 63 cents. My share has to start to consolidate above it. And then we all can take a sigh of relief thinking that there is enough buyers to protect the share to higher levels. So that critical level of support that must not change into a resistance is 55 cents, and above 62 cents, we will all take a sigh of relief. Have a look at my stochastic. Yes, I've got a divergence to the upside. Yes, both lines are pointing upwards. But if I look at my candles, I can see a lot of uncertainty. Last week's candle is a clear spinning candle, which tells me that yes, there were enough buyers to lift the share all the way back to close it at 58 cents. But there were also quite a few sellers there. So that tells us indecision. They're not sure what to do with this share, and therefore we should wait patiently. I do want to make you aware of this window at the top. Let's be optimistic and assume all will go well. Then we've got a beautiful window here, Roo, that we can aim for. And that window is waiting between R2.61 and R2.85. And a window on a weekly graph weighs very heavy. And remember, the rules around windows are they always get closed, no matter how long it takes, assuming the share doesn't get liquidated or delisted. Nice target to aim for, assuming that all will go well for Ascendis Health.